Well, the latest ratings which have come up on the state of the Indian economy are far from rosy. Fitch ratings have slashed India's GDP forecast to minus 10.5% for the financial year 2021 versus minus 5%, which it had forecast earlier. So a huge revision of a further minus 5.5%. India's outlook, according to Fitch, has been revised to negative from stable because of the impact of the coronavirus. The spread of the virus, the imposition of sporadic shutdowns, depress sentiment, they say, disrupt economic activity. High inflation added strains to household income. Expect the government debt to jump to 87.9% of GDP in the financial year 2021 versus 71% of GDP in financial year 2020. Have a structurally weaker real GDP growth outlook is another prediction going forward. So those are some of the details which have actually emerged. Well, joining us now, Kiran Mazumdar Shaw, the CMD of Biocon India Limited. Thanks very much, ma'am, for being with us. Now, Fitch has lowered its prediction for India to minus 10.5% with no visible flattening of the curve on COVID. Do you believe this uncertainty will continue?
Well, obviously, there is no, flattening of the curve that is evident at this point in time. Numbers are surging and certainly it is disrupting businesses. And I think people are concerned and, the various other kind of optics on GST, not being given to the state governments on time. All this is picked up by agencies like Fitch saying that there is fiscal challenge in the government, and therefore I think they have revised their outlook on India.
Okay.
And we do have a serious challenge because I do think that businesses are being disrupted, and we do need to see how we can basically have protocols that do not shut down operations at the start of an outbreak. We need to have a much more scientific handling of COVID management, which I don't think is happening in every state. So unless we see some kind of safe signs, we are going to have a very, very serious challenge in economic growth.
So one of the points mentioned by Fitch is that the government and economists are saying that the reopening of the country is helping the economy, but several states like Punjab, even today, or West Bengal are still implementing sporadic lockdowns. Obviously, one would need to do that given the number of cases you yourself have recovered from COVID. On the other hand, you talk for economy. We all speak for the economy. So aren't we in the middle of a fundamental contradiction, the need to protect lives versus the need to sustain our economy?
Vishnu, I am of the opinion that having more lockdowns is not going to help. I think you just need to manage the disease better. You need to manage the pandemic better. And I have just gone through this disease, and I really believe, I've had enough time to sort of introspect and realize how poorly we are managing this disease across this country. And that is where I think we need to put a lot of focus. I think we have just totally taken our eye off the COVID management ball. I mean, we were doing a great job during the lockdown. We have completely, thrown up our hands. I mean, we are not, enforcing containment zone practices. We are not enforcing anything. And I think people need to also rise to the challenge. I think this is not about government mandating behavior and protocol.
Sure.
It's about people actually understanding that their own livelihoods are at stake if they don't follow certain protocols and enforce it on others in a vigilant manner.
Ma'am, the Finance Ministry has said that India is witnessing a V-shaped recovery after the initial dip because of the lockdown. But Geeta Gopinath, the chief economist of the IMF, has said that it may not be that rosy as the statistics may fall after any initial rise. What are your thoughts on this?
I agree with Geeta Gopinath. I don't think it's a V-shaped recovery. I think it is going to be a very slow recovery. But I also believe that this is an opportunity for us to do a number of things which can actually, revive the economy a lot faster. I think I've spoken in the past about regulatory cholesterol. Why are we not bringing in very bold regulatory reforms? This is the time for us to actually put into practice the Prime Minister's, wish of minimum government, maximum governance. We have now IT and portals to basically leverage in terms of these kind of regulatory measures. But I'm afraid we are not doing a good job of that. We are simply doing a cut and paste from the physical world into the virtual world.
Yeah.
That is the way to bring in reforms. Secondly, this is also a time to focus on predictable and stable policies. That is also a big concern for investors and businesses. I think the cost of doing business has to improve.
Okay.
And removing regulatory hurdles will actually do that.
Now, ma'am, CMIE has estimated that the joblessness rate fell to 7.4% in July from a record 23.5% in April. But despite having jobs, wage growths are at an all-time low. How is this in fact at the core of our problems? Wage growth. There is no money to be spent on salaries or on companies growing in any way.
So first and foremost, I think we need to understand what kind of jobs are they counting. Secondly, I completely agree with you that there is going to be no wage growth definitely for the foreseeable future, for the rest of this year for sure. And I think this is something that people will have to live with. On the other hand, of course, businesses may be able to still maintain their profitability because a lot of costs have come down. There's no travel cost. There's a lot of other costs that are being saved. Mm-hmm. I think there is a genuine worry about wage growth, which is not going to happen for the rest of this year. And I think there's also a concern of the kind of jobs that are being created, which really doesn't put money in the hands of people to spend.
Right.
So I think people only spend on essentials and not spend on anything else.
Now, ma'am, the 23.9% contraction of the Indian economy, that's the other statistic that's really dominated the headlines, came as a blow to everyone. But some critics are saying that the actual numbers may be far worse because much of India is employed in the unorganized sector. Is that your sense as well?
Well, I won't be surprised. I mean, they may be right. I mean, right now I just go by the numbers that are put out in the public. But even a contraction of almost 24% is a cause for concern, as a cause for worry. I think when you see this kind of rapid contraction and when you don't see too many green shoots of growth and recovery, then it is time to look inwards and say, what can we do to spur that growth? There is no money to spur growth. So what else can we do? And I do believe that policies and regulatory reforms can be those non-financial incentives. That's the way you have to look at it. And I don't know why we are not doing it in a hurry.
Okay. Now, the government on the 20th of August announced an unemployment allowance for people who lost their jobs during the lockdown. But this covers just insured people in the ESIC database, and that accounts for just 6% of the total workforce of the country. Does this mean that the remaining 94% of workers will get no relief?
Well, by what you're saying, it appears that way, Vishnu, but I'm just saying that I think the government has to get real. The government actually has no money in the coffers, okay? And therefore, you're even seeing this huge controversy around GST reimbursements to the state governments, and state governments are being asked to borrow, which almost shows that this is a very serious situation. Now, of course, the finance minister has said that they will make good the GST dues to the state governments, but by when? I mean, I don't think state governments can wait forever to get their GST dues. But I think we have a very serious problem.
Sure.
And this problem does need to be handled in a very different way. And I'm not seeing any compelling, announcements or policies that gives me the comfort to know that things are going to revive very fast.
Yeah. The government's chief economic advisor, Krishnamurthy Subramanian, has hinted at the possibility of a short-term fiscal stimulus during the festive season to help the economy. What would you want this to be?
Look, I personally want not short-term, sporadic kind of incentives, because that's not going to really help us in the long term. I really think we need to relook at many of our policies, and we need to look at some of the things that I just talked about. Because, one of the examples I'll give you, Vishnu, is that, I was speaking to some of my international business friends, and I said, why are you not investing in India when there's this shifting of global supply chains from China? Why can't you bring it to India? And there are three reasons that they gave me. They said, first and foremost, for shifting supply chains out of China, it is a plug and play kind of a opportunity that we're looking at. India simply doesn't have the infrastructure for that plug and play opportunity. Secondly, India does not give us the comfort of predictable and stable policies. And I think that's what we need to look at. Look at GST. It keeps changing from month to month. Why can't we come out with a single GST slab once and for all and put an end to this constant kind of discussion around GST slabs? These are the kind of bold reforms you can do at this time. And believe me, when there is no GST to collect, this is the best time to really make such bold moves.
One final question. You mentioned China and the lack of a plug-and-play model to move business from China to India. But the other big issue is the China factor itself. We are now on the brink of something potentially much worse on the frontier. On the one hand, it's costing us enormous amounts, and these amounts will never be disclosed at a time when our economy is actually contracting to maintain the position all along the line of actual control. And secondly, sentiment of international investors must be hitting rock bottom if this is the situation between India and China.
Well, we are fighting two wars. One is an external war and one is an internal war on COVID. And I think, we also need to look at the healthcare sector. I want to make a pitch for the healthcare sector because, again, we are seeing how weak we are in terms of coping with COVID because we haven't invested in the healthcare sector. I think I would like to really focus on a post-COVID India, which I think really needs to focus on many, many things that we've neglected all these decades. So I just want to end by saying that, yes, we do have serious, problems on our frontier. I hope that will be done, will be dealt with by the government. But I also want to really focus on the economy because we've been always talking about economic prosperity in a very short term. That's nowhere on the horizon because of COVID. But I think we do need to really strategize for that.
It's always a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you so much, ma'am. Hopefully things do turn around as far as flattening that curve is concerned, because unless that happens, one really doesn't know what's going to happen. But important policy moves, this is the time. Will that actually be realized? Thank you very much for joining us.